I'm Mark Golub. Welcome to another in our JBS series, Election 2016, Road to the White House. Last time we took a look at the Republican primaries. This time we'd like to look at the Democratic primaries, where once again there has been a surprise showing by the Democratic senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders, who self-identifies as a Democratic socialist, and who in Iowa and New Hampshire has made the primary contests very difficult for the presumptive Democratic nominee for president, Hillary Clinton. A most recent average of polls produced by Real Clear Politics shows in Iowa, where the caucuses are tonight, the polls show Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton in a dead heat. Martin O'Malley remains a distant third. No one seems to be taking him seriously at all. And this program initially airs at 6:30 p.m. before the caucuses, but it'll be very interesting to see whether Senator Sanders or former Secretary of State Clinton comes out on top. Moving to New Hampshire, on the other hand, which that primary will take place on Tuesday, February 9th, Real Clear Politics has Bernie Sanders way ahead of Hillary Clinton by 15 points, 53% to 38%. And while anything can happen in the next week or so, it looks like, in New Hampshire at least, Bernie Sanders will defeat Hillary Clinton. Well, what about Jewish issues and concerns relating to the primary elections? For some comment, we're joined on our JBS phones now by Barbara Goldberg Goldman, chairperson of the National Jewish Democratic Council's Women's Leadership Network. And Barbara, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for having me.
Thank you, dear. So, Barbara, first of all, everybody on American television, in the newspapers, is talking about the surprise movement that Bernie Sanders has been able to generate in this primary process. Do you have any reaction yourself to why Bernie Sanders seems to be doing so well when many people thought he had no chance?
Well, I think it's a good question, and I think there's been a great deal of speculation with no crystal ball showing a very clear answer. My personal feeling, is that Bernie Sanders is resonating with a lot of young and new voters. He's saying exactly what many people want to hear from someone who has really not been as engaged as perhaps his primary opponent, Hillary Clinton. And as far as I'm concerned, my former governor, Maryland, Martin O'Malley. And so I think that while it appears as though they're running neck and neck, and it looks as though Bernie Sanders is making great headway both in Iowa and New Hampshire, if I had to have predicted through a crystal ball, which I don't have, as I earlier stated, I think his lead will, or his perceived lead will begin to fizzle. And I think that is because his experience and his gravitas does not begin to compare with that of Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. If you compare them side by side in terms of experience, there's really no contest there. Even Martin O'Malley, to a great extent, especially where Jewish issues are concerned, has I think a far greater resonance within the Jewish community.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. By the way, it's interesting, Barbara, when I listen to Senator O'Malley, governor, he's governor, correct?
Governor O'Malley, yes.
When I listen to him, he's very impressive. And yet at the same time, he's gotten no play in the American media. Do you understand that?
Well, I think you raise a really good point, Mark. I think there are a lot of Marylanders who don't understand it. Martin O'Malley was our governor here in Maryland for 8 years. In terms of Israel could not have had a better friend than Martin O'Malley. He brought in 20, I think maybe even more, 20 Israeli companies that now hire thousands of Marylanders. his bond with the State of Israel really remains unshakable. He has always made it very clear that Israel is of prime concern. He does support a two-state solution. I know that I have heard him say that multiple times over. He has met with President Shimon Peres. He, I believe, also has met with Naftali Bennett and Yair Lapid as well. And, not to sound Pollyanna, because I'm a Marylander and proud to be one, I'm not understanding why he hasn't created more of a following in the media as well as in the public.
I agree with you, and I feel the media has far too much power in shaping the amount of time and presence a candidate has. I believe it's true on the Republican side. I definitely feel it's true on the Democratic side. What people will say back to me is, if Martin O'Malley was having the kind of rallies with the size of the rally and the enthusiasm of the rally that Bernie Sanders had, then he would get the attention. And that in essence, each candidate's level of exposure in the media is a function of their success on the ground. To what extent do you think that's a fair comment?
Well, I think you have to ask what comes first, the chicken or the egg.
Right.
The media's attention to any one candidate, providing that candidate with the oxygen, gives them a leg up. And I don't think that O'Malley has been given that. I think Sanders has probably been given way too much. And I think that Hillary Clinton will be turning a corner. I think at that most recent town hall meeting, a corner was turned. And any obstructions in her way, I think she really did soar beyond them. So I agree with you. I think that the media oftentimes not just reports, but it tries to influence.
Absolutely.
I think it's probably more illustrative in the Republican Party. I think if they would stop giving Trump and Cruz the airtime, it might give more opportunity to some of the other candidates. It's almost preposterous when you look at Facebook or any other social media website and see all the coverage that's being given to those two candidates. So people who perhaps would not have their radar screens tacked on with a Trump picture or a Cruz photograph would not necessarily be giving it the time and attention, but it's sort of being shoved in faces. So if you look at our side, the Democratic side, and we only have the three candidates, so I do question how the media is covering each one. And I think that you raise a terrific point, and I think that we Americans need to carefully re-examine what we are permitting to influence how we view each candidate and what else would we need and would we want to have in terms of defining the individuals who are running for the highest office in the land. I also think, President Obama has done an incredible job with respect to the State of Israel's relationship and the United States, and I think he will go down and be considered as one of the finest presidents this country has ever seen, both on the domestic and foreign affairs sides.
Well, when you discuss the way in which the media plays, in my view, much too great of a role in how people consider candidates, I think you say it perfectly. What we also hear, and I can't tell, Barbara, where you are personally on this, and when I say personally, you represent now part of the Jewish democratic establishment. What we hear is that people in both parties, especially those who are, in a sense, leadership and professionals, they are very upset in each party with Donald Trump on the Republican side and with Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side. And it sounds as if you are very uncomfortable with the possibility that Bernie Sanders could generate this kind of enthusiasm because you believe that, in this instance, Hillary Clinton and in some way Governor OMalley would represent a more professional, more competent leadership. So to what extent can you tell us, is there, the extent to which you can take us behind the door, behind the scenes, to what extent is there real angst among political leadership, in this instance in the Democratic Party, because the media is making such a deal out of Bernie Sanders and he has generated very large and enthusiastic crowds and seems to be on his way to a very big victory in New Hampshire?
So I think you outline it very well, and I think we need to take a step back and look at who is attending the rallies, what the demographic is, what's the breakdown in age and in gender, and what the voting patterns have been within each. And you look at the money that's being raised, and you use the word angst, and I think that's where the angst would fall, is the fundraising element. Sanders has raised a significant amount of money that otherwise would have been distributed between OMalley and Clinton. And sadly, more and more money is being used and required for running for any office in the United States. So clearly, this is the epitome of big spending, and as you can well imagine, I am adamantly opposed to Citizens United and would love to see that change. So Sanders talks a very good game. His messages are resonating. Of course, we don't want to see that kind of spending. Of course, we want health care that is affordable to everybody. Of course, we don't want war. So he's not saying anything that really is different, but his messaging is one that is trying to define it as being something very different than an OMalley or a Clinton. And I think that both OMalley and Clinton are far more realistic about, one, all these proposals are terrific, but where are you going to get the money to finance them? We all want the middle class to grow and be stronger and more a forceful engine in America's economy. And it is critical that Americans unify when we are faced with crises. So Sanders' message is not, it's not disputable when it comes to what the bottom line or the goal would be. What I think is that he expresses it in a way of tearing down what's already been built in America. And he's doing a rollback to the 60s. And look, I see it in my own youngest daughter, for example. While I don't want to say that she is a Sanders supporter, because she is an avid feminist, and I think that is another factor that plays into many young women's decisions on who they are going to support. I think that it's almost de rigueur now to go back to a time when there were marches on Washington and people unifying and saying they are fed up. We have come a long way.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton has helped us get to that long way. Martin OMalley, I think, represents a youthful, Kennedy-esque way of looking at who we see as our future leaders. But rest assured that a Bernie Sanders would not be able to be running and gaining as much stride as he has had it not been for all of the growth and development that we have seen in our own political process at this point. He is being taken seriously.
Yes.
He definitely is.
Okay.
But he's not getting any support from his Senate colleagues. One has to say, why not? A commander-in-chief has to be able to work both sides. He has to be able, and she has to be able to bring together a variety of ideals and ideologies and come up with compromise. But I must tell you that I am very proud, more than ever proud that, one, we elected Barack Obama as our president, and two, we have three intelligent, seasoned candidates who talk substance and don't attack one another and don't say outlandish things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever, that bring us back to the 1950s, that gave rise to the 60s revolution. So we don't need a revolution now. We just need to build on what we already have, and that's a pretty tall order, and we have that foundation.
All right. One of the things I sense, Barbara, is that there are many people, responsible adults, who have become just fed up with the traditional politicians and traditional politics. And it's like, I hate them all, is what they're saying. And one of the reasons why Trump on the Republican side and Bernie Sanders on the Democratic side have generated, at least thus far, and again, it's a long way from either convention. We're only talking about Iowa and New Hampshire. But anyway, there are people who are arguing that you have two candidates whose appeal is far, far broader than the professional politicians behind the doors want to acknowledge, and that the reason they're being successful, and by the way, according to MSNBC, Bernie Sanders' money is coming not from the people who would normally be giving it otherwise.
Right.
And according to MSNBC, the average donation of Bernie Sanders is $27. It's just so many people have given him money. He's doing very well. But I want you to speak for a moment about this feeling, and this is not about fringe or crazy Americans. This is about mainstream, even mainstream Jews who I come across in New York, who are just saying, we want something totally different. And unfortunately, many of the candidates on the Republican side and Hillary Clinton on the Democratic side represent something that people are reacting to. And I think that is real to some extent, Barbara.
I think you're 100% right. Look, I hear it too. All politicians everybody lies. They're all liars, and
Right.
we need a change. And I think, by the way, that thinking helped us elect Barack Obama. And I agree
Right.
with you
Absolutely
that
right.
sentiment
You're absolutely
still
right.
exists. Where
Right.
I think it might, and by the way, you're 100% right about the amount of money that is being raised in the denomination that you point out. And the question I have is, do these people vote? Are they the ones who actually will go to the polls? And are people thinking beyond the rhetoric, beyond the disgust, and wanting a change? I can tell you, I sat in a room about a year ago talking about how the United States and Israel are moving toward very strong support when it comes to defense. And Cruz came into the room. Now, the audience was not a group of naive newbies. It was a group of very, I think, well-educated and thoughtful people. And Cruz got up there, and I kid you not, and he took credit for the funding of the Iron Dome. Now, I know, and I assume you know, that President Obama's budgets each year funded and increased funding for the Iron Dome, and Cruz really had very little to do with that. but yet he got a standing ovation. The next meeting that we went to was in the White House, where then State Department official Eric Lynn, who I believe is now running for Congress in Florida, outlined very specifically what President Obama did with the Iron Dome and how, when he went to Sderot for the first time, first learned about the Iron Dome and immediately turned to Eric and said, I want to know about this. Weapon. I want to know how we can resurrect it and bring it back to Israel. And so here was a group of people that an hour before gave Cruz a standing ovation because he took credit for Iron Dome funding, and then the next hour learned the facts about where the Iron Dome came from and what the funding levels were and where they originated.
I understand.
So what Sanders, so I use that as an illustration on that, the right side, and then on the left side, on the Democratic side, you look at what Sanders is saying, and people are reacting by saying, yes, we can't go back to what we have. It's almost like herd poisoning in a way. It carries, and I think you're right. A lot of people are not happy, and they want something new.
Yes.
And they are looking, but I think they will realize that this is not a realistic option.
Okay. We had Mark McNulty on last time, a communications spokesperson for the Republican Jewish Coalition. And I said to him, understand where most American Jews are. They vote roughly 70% for the Democratic Party. They feel that the Democratic Party reflects their social values far better than the Republican Party does. And I asked him to comment. In contrast, the rap against the Democratic Party among Jews who place support for Israel as a top priority is that the Democratic Party has been taken over by an element of the extreme left that boos from the floor of the Democratic National Convention when a plank is restored to the Democratic platform, calling for support for Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. What's your response to those American Jews who say the Democratic Party in general, and in some ways the Obama administration and Hillary Clinton, have created a breach in the U.S.-Israeli relationship so that no matter how good the Obama administration has been on military aid and on intelligence, the problem is that on the diplomatic side, the administration has emboldened the enemies of Israel, especially the Palestinians, who now believe they have an opening to pressure Israel because the current administration has created what it acknowledges is daylight between America and Israel. How would you answer that section of American Jewry committed to Israel, who feels that while socially they are with the Democratic Party, when it comes to Israel, they worry Hillary Clinton is simply going to be an extension of President Obama and Obama's policies on Israel and the Middle East?
Well, I think that you have summarized that perfectly, and I would say to them that their perception is all wrong, that because we would disagree with our elected officials does not mean we have in any way alienated ourselves from our own nation. And just the same way, I would say that just because we are critical, or some people are critical, of Israel's elected officials or policies, that they have alienated and disrupted and severed relationships between the two nations. There are many people within Israel, Israeli Jews, Israeli Palestinians, that do not agree with the current administration in Israel. There are many military officials that have come out in opposition against the administration in Israel. And I don't believe for 1 minute that it is a valid criticism to say that the Obama administration is the cause or the root of the problems that the Republicans would have us and have other members in the Jewish community as well as the secular community believe that there are divisions that are very, very deep. I guarantee you that when all is said and done, our tent is large, and it's a beautiful tent, and it embraces all views. You know as well as I do that we Jews have 7 answers to 2 questions, and I'm proud of that. It creates dialogue.
I understand. You know, Barbara, inside my family, I can be critical of almost anybody I want to be in a loving way, but I don't want anybody else outside my family talking about my daughter or my son or my wife. And what I don't understand, I mean, of course in Israel, there is enormous, robust debate. That says nothing about whether an American administration should be creating daylight, because in essence, one side in this issue is right, the side that keeps saying we will share the land, and one side is wrong, the side that says we will never share the land. And the United States of America has to understand, it seems to me, that when it comes to the world of international diplomacy, the message that must come out of the White House and Congress must be clear and unequivocal. So I respect all the things that President Obama has done, but I do not dismiss the criticism that has been leveled against the administration for making certain decisions, and you did not speak, by the way, to the far left booing at the last Democratic National Convention. That really bothers many American Jews, and it seems to me that everything you say in general is correct, and you say it beautifully, people who are in your position have to recognize the subtlety of the argument that the Democratic Party really must be willing to address.
So I was at that convention, and I was sitting there when the issue was brought to the floor. And, of course, my reaction is, how was that removed from the platform? How did that happen? And it turned out that, at least what I was told and what I believe, was that someone who is young and not at all well-versed somehow was able to delete, I believe it was a sentence or 2 sentences. And when it was put back in, I sat there. I did not hear a lot of boos. I did hear a couple. I did. But it was not overwhelming. But I think when you're dealing with 2 nations, 2 democracies, it's a little bit different because they impact the rest of the world.
Okay, we see this differently, but it is wonderful meeting you on the phone. You are fabulous. I would love to, either call you again or one day be able to sit with you in studio. But I appreciate so much what you've said. I'm sorry we're out of time because I have so many other questions. So I hope you'll let me call you again. We'll continue the conversation.
Absolutely. I would love to. Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you very, very much. Barbara Goldberg, Goldman, chairperson of the National Jewish Democratic Council's Women's Leadership Network. And I give her a great deal of credit. She answered every question I posed, pretty much on point, and I thought she was extremely articulate. My thanks, as always, to our director, Sloan Copeland, production coordinator, Serge Goldberg, JBS's associate director, Dara Golub, and the producer of this edition of Election 2016, Carol Lilienthal. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.